Hello, and welcome to a bonus episode of Pushing Cardboard. I'm Grant Lindenberg, your cardboard pusher, and today we have for you a audio-only transcript, or I guess recording, of the interview I did recently with Harold Buchanan at the Armchair Dragoons digital convention. They asked me to host for a couple of hours, and I had Harold is my guest, and Harold brought a couple of surprise guests along with him who pop in partway. So if you've already seen the YouTube video of this, well, don't worry. I'll have a regular episode in the next 6 to 10 days. But in the meantime, I thought folks might like to have a listen to this. So please enjoy. Here's my interview with Harold Buchanan. Hello to anybody out there in ACDC convention land. This is Grant Lindenberg from Pushing Cardboard, and I'm with my very special episode guest, Harold Buchanan, of design fame, of SD HistCon fame, online magazine, conflicts of interest. Harold does all kinds of things. Welcome, Harold.
Grant, thanks for the invite. Great to be here, and I look forward to a long and vigorous conversation.
Well, I hope it's both those things, because one without the other could be a little bit of, a little bit upsetting.
Yes, so true.
Just to ease into it, Harold, I'm up here in lovely Calgary, Alberta. We're having a Chinook, which means it's a nice warm wind that took the temperatures from 10 degrees below zero to 10 degrees above zero in a day. But that's not going to mean much to you, where the weather's probably like the same every day, 365.
Yeah, much more above zero here than below. And, San Diego's great, right? It's a very predictable life. It's sunny for the most part. And when it gets cold, it's like that's when it's 58 or 59, and we all complain. I'm never sure if when you and I are talking, I'm not sure if we're talking about Fs or Cs or Ks or.
I know you're talking Fs, and
but mainly because it's all I know.
Yeah, that's right. And then I made it easy. I said above or below freezing. So that's then you don't really have to worry about a C or an F. Well, that's I guess everybody that tunes in from the Northeast is probably jealous of you as well, but they'll have my back because they got some terrible weather out there this year too.
It's been amazing, and I grew up in Ohio and lived in Boston, outside Boston, for a couple of years, and so I'm empathetic. And when we move out here, we get soft. San Diego, you just get soft. It's terrible.
Yeah. But you're from Ohio. It seems like Ohio is like this fertile ground for wargamers.
Well, it's because there's nothing else to do in Ohio.
Yeah, fair enough. If that's the case, though, it should be fertile ground right here as well. Have you been to the ACDC before?
I've been around their online con. I think it's a fantastic event that they put on, and there's a great variety of things to do. One of the cool things about an online con for me is that we can just pop in and out of things. Even, somebody else is demoing a game. We don't have to have a ticket. We don't have to play. We can just pop in and look over their shoulder and hear it and see it and pop out. So all very easy. Yesterday, Pete, you found us. That's the good news, buddy.
Pete's the sysop for the Mastodon wargamers.social instance. So he's been kind of rounding up the stragglers and giving them a place to stay.
That's excellent. That's good. Doing the Lord's work. Yeah, so yesterday I played. What did I play yesterday? I played the Judean Hammer.
Oh yeah.
With Tim. So I didn't. I eventually realized that Tim was Catastrophe Games, and they're doing a lot of interesting things. The Judean Hammer is a very interesting game, fun, super quick to play.
And what I haven't played that game. What system? It's like it and Bear Trap, I think, are both based on a similar system.
I can't speak for Bear Trap. It's a card-driven game, operations and events, and the operations are moving and rallying troops, I guess. And then, if you end up in the same space, you fight, and you've got some asymmetric victory conditions between the Greeks and the Jewish contingent, and it was fun. What a great game. But the other thing that he's done is he funded the art and development and of course the production of Stonewall Uprising, right, which is Taylor Schuss's game, and I had the great fortune of playing that with Taylor himself here a couple of weeks ago in San Diego at a little convention, and man, what a great bit of cultural history and just a real experience for a game. So I love what Tim's doing with that Catastrophe Games.
It feels like on the fringes of our war game space right now, there's a lot of designs coming from some of these smaller publishers that are more interested in social history, or like we're seeing lots of games, or not lots, 2 games on the suffragette movement in the last few years. Stonewall, Hollandspiel had a game on recovering from what it's like to recover from a serious brain trauma. There's all these things bubbling around the edges of our hobby right now that give us all, like, I don't know, somewhere extra to go.
Yeah, the way I think about it is that we're all interested in history, right? The thing that gets me fired up about this stuff is history, and quite frankly, most of history wasn't kinetic conflict, right? Most of history was other stuff going on, the cultural change and diplomatic influence and all sorts of things like that. So I love the fact that we are expanding into number one, that we're expanding into those areas of history that aren't necessarily kinetic conflict, which you and I have been playing games about for 30 plus years. Well, for you, 15 plus years because you're so young, but for me, 30 plus years.
40 years for me.
But the other thing that's cool, the other thing that's cool is that we're welcoming a group of people that are very, that are different than you and I, right? We're really quite a heterogeneous group and have been for the past 40 years, right? So I think it's wonderful that we're seeing more and more people that are different. And if you get different gamers into the space, you're going to have them telling different stories. And
one of the things that I've always liked about the wargaming hobby is, yes, there's always been this kind of nerdy white guy thing about it. Yeah. But on the other hand, it has always been open. It's been very open to the fringes, whatever they are. So I look at it as we've always been welcoming to the sort of nerdiest white guys. Well, we're pretty open to anybody, any nerdy person who wants to join our tribe.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that, and I'm pretty hard on the hobby and challenging us to push beyond that. I'll try not to digress too much, but I think it's great that we're willing to allow others into our hobby, but I think that that's not enough. So my theory is Jeff, another nerdy white guy. Yeah, I hear you, Jeff. But I think that we have to reach out and facilitate a welcome for a very diverse group of people. There's a bunch of stuff that I don't understand. I don't know about you, Grant, but I've got a lot of blind spots. I'm a professor, and I see that all the time. There are things that I don't understand and miss. So here comes Taylor Schuss with Stonewall Uprising. And he comes to the SD HistCon, and we're talking about it, and I'm like, what is the Stonewall Uprising?
Oh,
So,
I'm a theater person, so
Yeah.
the gay history is deep in my veins.
right, and I'm embarrassed that it isn't for me, right? And but I have to be honest, and so going through the fight for gay civil rights is something that just wasn't on my radar, and I'm empathetic, and I feel for them, and once again, anybody's welcome, but man, I didn't understand any of that because of my blind spots, which was the way I was brought up. So, and I don't, I'm not expecting everybody to go out and play Taylor's game, but it's a great example of new voices, right? Of people looking at different aspects of history.
Well, I think this in a different way, but I think similarly about Cross Bronx Expressway, which is coming out soon, which is another kind of a social action game looking at urbanization and development of communities, right? And its designer is a person of color, so there's going to be a different perspective than we're used to in our fairly white hobby.
Yeah, and it started, and we've got to accelerate it and make sure that it continues unabated.
Well, I think one of the challenges is that I've found in my 40 years of wargaming that a lot of the folks in the hobby are the shy type of person, and it's hard enough just coming together to play. Trying to add promote on top of that, it takes a different kind of personality to get out there and try and broadcast what we're doing.
Yeah, it does, and that's not a fault in us, right? That's just who we are for the most part, and again, I sometimes I'm a little hard on the hobby, but I think opportunity to welcome new and interesting people just broadens our perspectives. Let me give you another example. A friend of mine is a female of Filipino descent, first generation in the United States, and she's at Consim World, right? So at Consim World, I like to play 3 or 4 days of a big bite game, and then I like to go play. It's my favorite convention. The Consim World is wonderful. But, Consim World's full of, people that look like us.
Old white guys.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Which, once again, I don't blame any of us for being old white guys. We just know that. Yeah, I agree with your point, Jeff. And I said, I want to connect with you and others to play some other games. They'll take a day or so each, but I want to play 4 or 5 days of A Most Fearful Sacrifice.
Yes.
So I jump in. Bayonet Brant. He just came here because he wants a chance at winning the game, right? Brant, you're disqualified instantly. No chance. So appreciate you trying, but it's not going to happen. Full retail for you, my friend. So I'm playing 5 days of A Most Fearful Sacrifice, and we had a brief discussion of the symbols that are used on the cover of the game. That I of course reflect history, but also currently reflect some issues around white supremacy. And I was talking to her about it, and she said, "How could I even think about playing a game like that?" Right? I mean, she sees the symbols, and it's a sensitivity that I once again I'm blind to. I'm learning, I'm growing, but I'm a little bit blind to that. So anyway, yeah, I'm excited about the direction that the hobby's going, right? We're going to continue playing hex and counter games for as long as you and I live. But I'm excited that we've got new and different ideas to expand the quantity of games that are available to us that are historical. It's amazing.
That's where when people get their feathers in a knot about new ways to design games or new things to look at. I just always feel like I need to remind them it's not a zero-sum game. Yeah. Making more new types of games doesn't seem to me to be decreasing the number of old types of games that are still being made. there's still hex and counter games being made every day.
Right. There's a great book that was very popular in the 90s. It was Who Moved My Cheese? It was a very short book, and it was it's a lot of kind of fast answer business strategy books. Yeah, usually very cheesy. Well, this one literally cheesy. And the book was really about, when you're the mouse in the maze and you know where the cheese is, then it's a very comfortable existence. But when you feel like somebody's moving your cheese, it may be better cheese and it may be a better place. But man, when somebody moves your cheese, you're going to get upset. And that's often what happens, right? That we feel like people are moving our cheese. People move my cheese, right? I've had my cheese moved before. And I think sometimes when I profess or complain too much about restrictions in the hobby or limitations or perspectives or whatever, people feel like I'm trying to move their cheese. And man, hex and counter war games to the end. I played one last weekend.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, I mean, my wife keeps telling me change is good for me. I never like it, but I know she's right. Well, I'm sure we'll talk more about the future of the hobby. But to go back, you came out of Ohio and then came west. Or did you get into war games when you were young? Like, were you we're in the same decade of age. Yeah. Were you like an Avalon Hill guy or an SPI guy?
Well, I think I was an Avalon Hill guy. The guy I played games with for the most part in high school was the SPI guy. So it was a good mix. I started, I had a middle school teacher, Mr. Smith, interestingly enough, was a history teacher. And what do we call it? Social studies at the time, I think. And he invited about 6 of us or 7 of us to come and play diplomacy at his house. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. And we did that for a handful of weekends over the course of the year we were there. And it was really eye-opening, but it wasn't until my buddy, Andy Nutgrass, his dad was the principal at our high school, and went over to his house and played a game for the first time called Battle of the Bulge. And it was the first Avalon Hill version. And boy, I just loved that. It really, I was bit by the.
That was the first one that you just couldn't get enough of.
Yeah. And it was so interesting. Well, just in so many ways, right? So really loved that, and still have a special place in my heart for it. Very fond of the game, and from there, Andy and I would play a few games, but I met another gentleman that I love very much, and he and I played everything. And he was a great gamer, named John. Actually dedicated my first game to him, Liberty or Death. John was a wonderful guy, had some of his own demons, and after college committed suicide. And I, during college, got busy with kind of life, studies and girls and things like that, and stopped playing games. And then after I lost my buddy, it was hard to get back into games. So it just didn't happen for me until my kids were grown and moved out and started going to college. And I just picked up where I left off. But
suddenly you have space and time again once the kids are gone. I think
it's disposable income for a change, right? Family, some disposable income. So picked up some old games and, tried to network a little bit. The internet had changed the world of interactions between gamers.
Yeah.
So that was awesome. And, but
before the internet, were you on Genie or any of those services? There was a big ASL group that I was part of on Genie that then went on to, once the internet came along, there was a listserv. For a while, we were on a listserv, the ASL mailing list, and it was like, it was clear that there were so many people wanting to connect that couldn't connect, but suddenly there was this way to play that and way to talk about the game with people that it was way bigger than you ever could have imagined in your hometown.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. I picked up Andean Abyss was the first game ASL ML, says Pete.
Exactly.
I picked up Andean Abyss, which was Volko's first coin game, and that blew me away. Right? It's like, oh my goodness, I never thought about that. And then I realized how much I had missed from the final days of Avalon Hill and SPI, the development of GMT, a host of other companies. Right? That all that was new stuff. So it was really quite an amazing experience. There's another.
You would have missed in that part where you were away, you would have missed a couple of key developments too, in that there was, on the one hand, you had Mark Herman give us the CDG,
right,
and on the other hand, you had Courtney Allen give us the area impulse movement games.
Yes.
Both, which are like, that's my bread and butter. That's what I want to play more than anything else quite often, is those two things. So you had a bit of backfilling to go in.
Yeah, I did. The other interesting thing that I noticed was there was also a great deal of change. I found another player here in town, and he and I played, and we had similar tastes. But I went to ConSim World Expo for the first time when I started back, and when I was there, I networked a bunch. Just looked for people from San Diego and found a group, and then other people, introduced me to somebody, and I got introduced to a bunch of gamers who had been through this interesting cycle that I think wasn't uncommon. And it was a group of people that started playing war games, traditional hex and counter war games. But then when Catan came out, they moved into Euro games. And now they played a bunch of Euro games. So, I found a bunch of war gamers, but they weren't playing war games anymore, right? So that was a curiosity.
Did you manage to convert them back?
I think so, right? Part of it was they just didn't feel like there were events or people with common interests. And it had all just sort of waned on its own.
Right.
So I started putting together, weekly meetings, monthly meetings, promoting those, inviting people personally, right? Just building a powerful group. We've got an amazing group in San Diego now, but, when I got here, it was, in groups of 2 or 3 in their own garages.
Right. Yeah. I founded an ASL club here back in the 90s, and it was the same thing. It turned out there was lots of folks who wanted to play, but they just didn't have the personalities to find each other. So they just needed someone to kind of get out there and pull them all together, organize a space, and set a monthly date, or we did bi-weekly actually. And once they found each other, they were happy as ducks in a pond. But it just took somebody to kind of round them all up. And it does take kind of getting out there, putting your name out there, being willing to like hang around the game store a little bit and see who's browsing the shelves sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. And Brant's referring in his comment to the gamers that want something more. At the time, a lot of people that wanted something more than Risk and Sorry and saw Euro games as that opportunity. And then when we started to see those games roll in, right, Catan and let's see, he references Citadels, but a host of other games that kind of move people into those opportunities. People were happy to take advantage of them, and we lost some war gamers. And I think that there's a big opportunity now. We're seeing people start to move from those heavy duty Euros into some of the games that we like to play. And it's not a movement directly into hex and counter, right? Because that's, as far as new people moving into the hobby from Euros, that's the place where they want to go the least. My experience.
Yeah, I think that the games that David Thompson's been making, like the Undaunted and stuff like that, they appeal to the Euro gamers in terms of the rules overhead. It's not a big lift. Like wargamers are used to big lifts, but Euro gamers often aren't. The components are pretty. and still not overwhelming, and there's no hexes. So I think there's a few designers that are doing stuff like that. Well, and I mean, your latest game is also in that field. Yeah. A quicker playing game that's got six or eight pages of rules, and that's with plenty of illustrations.
Yeah. Yeah, the goal there, and I'm sure we'll talk more about it over time, but the goal in that game was wasn't to create a thoughtful, deep simulation of the space. It was, can I create a game on the topic that's interesting to people that want something that fast to teach, fast to play, and then you're not required to memorize the deck before you play to be competitive, right?
Right.
My favorite game's Twilight Struggle. But it's hard for new people because if you don't know the deck, then we're not even competitive.
That's the thing about that game. It's only a great game between two people of equal deck memorization level in a way.
Mm-hmm. So true.
I think Jeff has a good point too. In the 90s, computer games really started to look good, and I know I went down the computer war game rabbit hole for quite a few years.
Yeah. Yeah, I did some of those. I did some of the simulations, Apache and F-15.
Yeah.
But I also played a bunch of Tecmo Bowl on the Atari. So, there were all sorts of distractions.
Matrix games got a lot of my money for a lot of years.
Yeah.
And it was another way to play via PBM because they had a lot of games where you could do a turn and then email the file to your opponent across the country somewhere and get it back the next day.
That's awesome.
But Vassal's doing that for me now. I think a lot of folks who are really into computer war games have come back to the table though as well. I think there's you sort of miss the social element when you're just playing either versus the AI or even versus another player via PBEM.
That was part of what I found with Coin playing Andean Abyss. Was that it's four people given some very interesting situations with the asymmetry. A rule set that wasn't easy, but also, not the most complex thing I've ever read. Once you start to grok what he's doing with it, it's kind of understandable. But man, the fellowship of four people around the table, sometimes being partners and sometimes cursing each other, and just, the fun of and fellowship of playing a game with three other people was fantastic.
Yeah, the coin system really, more than any other series of games, opened up wargaming to a more multiplayer experience. I mean, I'm a two-player guy at heart, but from time to time I like to play a bigger game for sure. And Volko's series sort of made that I brought in more people who were like who wanted a bigger experience that way.
Yeah, there were plenty of multiplayer games before that, but boy, that one sure had an impact.
Yeah, but I don't know that there were plenty of multiplayer sort of war games or conflict simulations. I don't want to get into the semantics here.
Yeah, no, I agree. Not a useful discussion, but Richard Berg might disagree with you, right? He's full of ancient games with multiplayer.
Yeah,
but certainly, games we've lived in a paradigm of two-player.
Yeah.
Or solo, right? Even in high school, I played a ton of games on my dinner table by myself, right?
Absolutely. So when, I don't know, maybe it's changed. When you were growing up, did you have a favorite designer, or do you have a favorite designer now?
Well, I have
so many friends that are designers. I don't want you to get in hot water.
Yeah, I've got to be careful. No, I'm never careful with my opinions. I'm sure you've noted, but I don't know that I had a favorite designer. I probably wasn't a sophisticated enough consumer in high school to do that. I loved a lot of stuff that Mark Herman did, and I didn't realize it.
Right.
So October War, right, which he developed. The Next War, which is a Dunnigan design, but frankly, Dunnigan gave him a piece of paper with an outline and handed it to Mark, and Mark designed The Next War.
Right. That's a classic Dunnigan story.
Yeah, Mech War 2. You know, I mean, what a wonderful education for Mark. But you know, those were some of my favorite games, and I loved games at the time on modern conflict. So the Arab-Israeli wars were really interesting to me. All of the, you know, Cold War gone hot stuff, which at the time didn't really seem all that hypothetical, right? Because it was in the news.
Yeah.
Those were all, so I probably wasn't sophisticated enough to know what I was, you know, I even met Mark Herman in 1981 at an Origins and didn't realize it. I mean, I didn't, he was a weird guy wearing shorts with a crazy haircut and, or lack of a haircut, you know, for that matter. Now, I love me some Mark Herman. I spend as much time with that guy as I can. I just hope something drips off his hair and into my body and I absorb it. He's amazing. He's smart and thoughtful, and I just love him as a designer. I think Volko does extraordinary things. You know, he's amazing. So
they're both wildly supportive of other designers and the hobby and the business of design in general.
Yeah, and I think you know, well, Mark is for sure. Volko is a new level. Mm-hmm. And you know, even coming from a corporate environment where collaboration is important, I think that what Volko does is role model for any organization. I mean, his level of giving, which I benefited from, right? I remember I took a prototype of Liberty or Death to Gene Billingsley at Consim World. And frankly, you know, I'd been playing that with my friends for a year, and that's the only reason I designed it. It was an Indian Abyss remake in my mind, right? And so we've been playing the American Revolution, and I just sent Volko an email and said, "Hey, I just want to show you what you created, right? What a cool system, and I used it here." And he sent me one back, and he said, "Are you going to Consim World?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd love to meet you." And he said, "Well, I'm not going, but meet with Gene." And so I went and met with Gene and ended up telling him about my game, showed him something. And Gene said, you know, you need to, okay, go ahead and do it. And I wasn't really asking to do it. I was just showing off, you know, what a cool network that you all created. So in the process of doing that, you know, I worked with Mike Bercelli and Jordan Kerr and Joel Toppin and a handful of other coin experts kind of from around GMT. But I said, I can't really do this unless I can spend some time with Volko. So Volko said, let's set up a meeting. And every week for months, every week I would spend an hour, and I limited it to an hour. I forced that limit, which I do on many things because people can't pay attention for more than an hour. But I didn't want to take up any more of his time. And man, every meeting he was there and he was contributing and he was absorbed. And I'm thinking, why in the world, right? It's just kindness. It's just a big heart. And you know, he's done that for me, and he's done that for a ton of other people.
And now with the Levian campaign system and the whole Discord server they set up for that, he's taken that, like he was already going above and beyond in his coin development. He's taken it to a whole nother level with his Levian campaign development.
He has. And, you know, it's the technology and his generosity collide and in Levian campaign. It's a lot of just good things happening at the same time. But, you know, the result for all of us is just a bunch of cool options for more games, right?
Yeah, totally.
And it doesn't.
I worry that I can't keep up with how many good games are coming out.
I've accepted that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Do you have a favorite? Do you have a favorite style of game you like to play, or you know, like you know, you were just playing some Hex Encounter games, but you've kind of got a broad Catholic tastes here. What do you have a favorite?
I don't know. I probably do. Maybe I'm not aware of it. I like to, as a designer, I think it's really healthy for me to see a whole bunch of different things. So I force myself to play new stuff with some regularity. I find it painful sometimes, but my friends my friends that used to be war gamers that are now Euro gamers, I try to go over to their house once a month and play a bunch of new stuff. They never play a game twice, which is another curiosity. But
yeah,
so I like to play new stuff, and I like mixing it up. I think I don't know. Hard to say what my favorite is. I love card-driven games. I spent a huge amount of time over the holiday playing. Let's see, Battle of the Bulge, Avalon Hill. What was it called?
Card-driven.
There are 4 games. It's a Battle for the Ardennes. Battles for the Ardennes, and I spent all weekend playing that. And then I called John Butterfield during the holiday and talked to him for 2 hours about it because he was the developer, right? So yeah, that's it. I love the American Revolution more than most things. The Mark Miklos series of games I think are phenomenal. So yeah, that's the best I can give you on favorites.
Well, that's all good. I'm a Courtney Allen fan, so those area impulse games, I'm still digging that. But you just said you were you have this kind of deep interest in the American Revolution, which of course that was your first game, and just from sort of reading things you've written or talked about over the years, it seems to me a big part of your interest in designing that game was your consideration that it wasn't strictly a bipolar conflict, that it needed more than 2 sides to actually to simulate what was really going on. Have I got that right?
Yeah, I think so. Right. So I was at MIT studying finance and economic game theory, and a part of that was that when in economic game theory there are some really interesting things that relate to choices you or I might make, 2 people making decisions based or anticipating what the other might make. Right. The prisoner's dilemma is the classic, kind of example of a economic game theory question with 2 parties. At the same time, conflicts are never 2 parties. There's always more people at the table. And, World War II, right? Axis and Allies, no way. I mean, even Mark Herman demonstrated to us that even the British and the Americans couldn't agree all the time.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and that's just the superpowers, right? The great powers. Then what about everybody else in between, right? Yugoslavia had some issues, and yeah, absolutely. So, we could go on and on and on. So, no conflict is 2-party.
So, in designing your game, did given how we think of it traditionally as the colonists versus the Brits, was it difficult to find a way in to give the indigenous people and the French an equal footing, an equal share at the table in terms of making a game?
Yeah, well, first of all, they weren't equal, right? I mean, so I concern myself less with equal.
No, I mean equal as a game, not as a.
Yeah, no, that's the problem, right? There's the history, and then there's our need to make it a game where you have 4 people at the table that feel like they have some equal interest in winning.
Right.
So that's an astute point. I think first of all, the people don't realize, people don't know enough about the history of the American Revolution. Especially when we've been fed a big dose of it in 7th grade, and we, George Washington, Superman, and all of that stuff, right? Which he probably was Superman, by the way. But I think, in 1779, the largest military action for the Patriots in the North, right? So we're excluding the Southern campaign. The biggest was a movement against an armed movement against the Iroquois. And so, that was the biggest action in the North during that year. It's crazy when you think about it, right? And it's only crazy. It only feels crazy because we don't think of it that way. And that there really was a battle for the rights of the colonists, and then there was a frontier war.
Right.
And that frontier war was just as distracting to everybody as the battle. The other thing that's interesting with the native faction is that during the French and Indian War, the natives chose, for the most part, not exclusively, and also true during the American Revolution, chose the French because the French were less intrusive. The French brought traders, and the British brought farmers, right? I mean, they brought colonists to settle. And there's a big difference, and that's why that happened. So then you jump forward to the American Revolution, right? And so then you've got the Patriots and the British, and the native factions have to choose. Well, who do you choose, right? Do you choose the people that want to settle on your land and push you out? Or do you choose the British? And they didn't have any choice but to choose the British. And the proclamation line of 1763 was set by King George. So it was an attempt to allow the native peoples to maintain on the remainder of their, But, so for me, it was easy to give them a seat at the table with that perspective. But, they were never going to win. And so in the context of my little game that covers 8 to 10 years, 6 or 8 years, you can't say that they're going to win. Now, could they have maintained a better position than they maintained originally? Yeah, you can do better. But you're never going to win.
No, but that's the way we make games, right? It's like we've got to fudge the victory conditions to make it a game. Otherwise, it's not really a game. It's just a recreation or a reenactment or something.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't necessarily believe that all 4 factions have to be equal, right? I believe that
with four, there's a bit of self-balancing that goes on in any case. It's much harder to fine-tune the balance of a 2-player game, I would think, than a 4-player game, because if one player is overpowered in a 4-player game, the other 3 players are going to come after them.
Yeah, it's a dirty secret that we don't talk much about, but the reality is that the multiplayer games do have a self-regulating system built into them. So that's for sure. Now the French were easy, right? I mean, frankly, in my mind, the American Revolution, and actually I'm talking with another notable designer about this concept, but the American Revolution was French versus British, and the colonists had a seat at the table, but there is a perspective that there were 2 kings, the most powerful countries in the world, 2 sovereign nations that were fighting over not just North America, right, but also the West Indies, the East Indies, and the Mediterranean and Africa. And this was actually a small piece. The American Revolution was a tiny piece of a much larger conflict between those 2 parties. So the French was not hard for me to pull in. Some people don't like playing the French in that game because until they enter the war, whatever that means, they don't place any troops on the map, right?
Right.
But for me, that's my favorite faction to play is the French.
Right.
Because the method and timing of the entrance of the French into that war can make all the differences to the outcome.
And there's all the diplomatic stuff you get to do before that, right?
That's right.
Sort of set the table. So when you move from that game to campaigns of 1777, and you got to turn it, I mean, it makes sense you turn it back into a binary conflict because that your second game is more operational in scale rather than grand strategic. So it makes sense. But did it feel a bit strange to go, well, what am I doing now with it? I've made this grand statement about how it's a multi conflict, and now we're back to 2.
Yeah, so true. You know, the funny thing about Campaigns of 77 was it came out of there were a couple things that came out of that. First of all, you know, my buddy John that I talked about earlier, he loved Strategy and Tactics magazine, and we were always playing it and talking about it, playing games from that magazine. And so I thought, you know, what a nice tribute to him to get a game into Strategy and Tactics, right?
Right.
So you know, again, dedicated to him. But that was one of the reasons I wanted to do that. I had a wonderful experience with GMT, and I'm not sure I'll do anything for anybody else the rest of my life. As a designer, it's so good to work with GMT. But I said, okay, one game, I can do a game. So I had a discussion with Mark Miklos, and it was when I was doing Liberty or Death, and Mark and I were talking about the role of the French. Now, he has a game. Is it Savannah? So he has one of his games has the French as a faction. And at WBC, he has used implicit 3-way ties at the end of that tournament. You know, he has the Battles of the American Revolution tournament. When he has 3 players that end up in a tie, sometimes what he will do is he'll play that game, and it will be British against Patriots against French. Now, the French and the Patriots don't fight each other. They fight each other for victory points. But one of the wonderful things that does is it really demonstrated that the Patriots and British or French didn't always agree.
Right.
For example, you get bonus chits, right, that you can use in that game for the Patriot side. But in his structure of this game, the French, when in a 3-player game, the French and the Patriots have to agree who uses the chit and which battles, and that doesn't happen. And it's a wonderful example of why that is the French are important. Anyway, back to Campaigns of 77. Mark said that Saratoga was a wonderful battlefield victory, and of course it is. I'm okay with that, right? I hear you. I hear it, and I know that's the case. But you can interrupt me at any point, and I can go back to this excellent story.
We have a special guest who's dropped in. And I think he's ready to go. I haven't been able to say hello to him yet, but let's just see if I can make this work.
All right.
I want to say welcome to Jason Matthews. Harold just earlier had said his all-time favorite game was Twilight Struggle, and so there we have Jason Matthews. Good to see you, Jason.
I'm really just here to advertise. I have this background, and so I show up on podcasts and wave the flag.
Well, I don't know if that game needs any more advertising, but maybe you can do the Red Sea version or whatever it's called. Maybe that needs a little pumping right now.
For sure. I'm still waiting on a review of some sort, so it does need pumping, actually.
Oh yeah, well, I don't know who could possibly do that for you.
That's the silly part. Everybody on Earth in our little part of the hobby has already played it, so I'm kind of like, guys, it will take you 15 minutes. Give it a whirl.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that's understated and subtle as always, Jason. What's next? What's coming after this Red Sea? Are we going to have more Twilight Struggle type games?
Well, yes. It wasn't. I have other things that I'm also working on and I have to complete, so I'm not quite sure how the timeline will all fall together. And some things that seem like they'll take a long time are faster than things that seem like they should be short and, take forever. But Jason Carr and I are going to work on another Twilight Struggle kind of magnifying glass style game where we're looking at a particular region in depth. And if Red Sea is supposed to be like an introductory game for people who want to teach the system to other potential players, or a way to access the game for kind of Euro players who've heard about it but don't want to commit to 3 hours or whatever. This next game will be like Twilight Struggle Plus. We're trying to make it a more taxing experience, advanced Twilight Struggle, let's call it, so that it will appeal more to existing players of the system who are like, oh, I want to try something a little harder, or I think I've got this down, so I need a new challenge.
That sounds fantastic. I always feel like we spend so much time focusing on getting new players in. It's nice to hear a veteran designer saying, I want to give something crunchy to the grogs and let them chew on it.
Yeah, well, I haven't exactly been the grogs' favorite designer, so I suppose I owe them one.
Imperial Struggle's pretty crunchy.
It is, deliberately so. But then in that game, Ananda and I always, well, look, no one is designing a game that involves the War of Austrian Succession for the general public. So it was always aimed at the GMT folks.
Will you do anything else, do you think, along the Imperial Struggle lines as opposed to the Twilight Struggle?
I love that system so well. And if I did, I have a lot of weird ideas for it that don't really translate all that well to like the existing context. But I really, I wanted to do a game about the competition between kind of the emerging competition between the United States and Russia over the Arctic. And I think that Imperial Struggle system, where it's sort of like tiles that represent different economic structures as well as political structures and alliances and that sort of thing, would translates well potentially to the kind of wild, wild west in the north that exists right now.
The thing I love about it is how there's so many levers to pull, but they don't do just one single thing. You play one tile and everything ripples in that game. There's so much interconnectedness. And then to go back to your idea of the struggle for the Arctic, sitting here in Calgary, I feel like I'm between you and the Arctic, and I'm going to get walked on a little bit.
Well, I mean, one of the many interesting dynamics about the politics of the Arctic is that while certain elements of NATO, including the United States, would like NATO to extend its operations and reach to the Arctic, the Canadians are very sensitive about their sovereignty vis-a-vis the Americans and how we tend to sort of trample all over it. And Canada has traditionally been the country within NATO who's been like, we got this, stay out of our backyard.
Well, we're going to take all our water. That's the thing. We know you're going to run out, and then you're going to come to want ours.
It's so delicious. And I'm from Los Angeles, and Harold's in San Diego. So, yes, we're coming for your icebergs.
There's no we're going to run out. We have run out of water.
Well, do you know the little island that the Canada fights with the Danes over?
I do. Do you have that? I heard about this in Denmark, actually, and you switch vodkas or something at the island. Or
I think you put a bottle of rye whiskey, and then they come back with a bottle of schnapps or something. And whoever's there last leaves their mark. Yeah.
Well, let's hope it turns into something a little more heated, because we need more material for war games.
We do. Jason, thanks for dropping in, man. I don't want to take up much of your time, but great seeing you, and appreciate the quick drop in.
Yeah, my pleasure. I wanted to leave you. You were in the midst of a very interesting discussion on the nature of the Revolutionary War and the participation of the French, but I did have a question for you to get to when you can during this extended discussion, which is the wargaming part of the hobby is really the origin of the hobby, as not in gaming in general, but just sort of this hobbyist, more intensive style of gaming. But it was marginalized for a very long time. And I'm curious why you think that happened. And now, as the gaming renaissance occurs and the wargaming renaissance occurs with it, what are the next steps for us to reemerge as a thriving and important part of the hobby?
Wow. Well, that's heavy, and I don't think it's fair for you to leave us with that. I think you should have to answer it, but maybe you can have a future podcast with Grant here, and you two can chew that. I'm not sure I have a response.
Yeah, I can't sort of separate. I can't separate all the different facts that led to what felt like wargaming or historical gaming kind of taking a powder sort of in the 90s for a while, and then I can't separate out all the factors that led into that. Was it that we were sort of subtly unfashionable, or was it the rise of computer wargaming that was attracting people? I think there was a fair number of things that were playing into it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, obviously there were a ton of it, and then there's like a trendiness to all arts, right? We were succeeded a little bit by role playing. Role playing was succeeded by CCGs. CCGs were succeeded by Eurogaming. So that part's understandable, but we got to the point where we were having a near-death experience altogether, and we seem to have survived that. So that's the awesome part. And now there's a lot of innovation in the wargaming sector of the hobby that I don't see in Eurogaming, which seems to have stalled out a little bit in terms of innovation. So I think that's awesome, but we still have to get the word out a little bit.
We keep coming back to that in this discussion about how hard it is for our hobby to self-promote. People within this hobby aren't natural self-promoters. We seem to attract a lot of introverts and people who are also just like will really go hard down a rabbit hole, but they don't kind of come out and spread what they found. They just kind of got down there and found out what it was.
Yeah, that is a very interesting point. And also to that point, there's always actually been a lot of innovation in the historical part of gaming, but so much of it gets tried once in one design that everybody talks about, then it gets dropped and is never heard from again. I mean, the SPI guys were doing a ton of interesting things, but most of them are kind of one-offs.
I think of a game like Angola that was, I think that was really innovative, and it languished for years. And all of a sudden, there's a couple of games I hear on the go. People are designed like all of a sudden they've discovered Angola, and it's like, I've got to do that 4-player thing. I've got to do that thing where you stack your orders, and that's the way it goes. Like sometimes it just takes a while for something to catch on.
And that is the poster child, because I also discovered that game late, and I was like, this game is genius, and it's so old. Like it's a very long in the tooth design, and we would have benefited from incorporating some of its ideas a little earlier, I think.
Yeah, totally cool game. And it's funny how that didn't catch on, but I was talking earlier about Courtney Allen and how when he came up with the area impulse thing, Avalon Hill did, eventually 4, but then since then, MMP's done a couple, and Mike Ranella's made a whole career out of doing. He does the occasional CDG, but mostly he does area impulse. And it's funny how some innovations catch on and roll, and some just kind of people agree that it was a great game, and then nobody steals the idea.
Right, Upfront being another kind of poster child for this problem.
Courtney Allen yet again.
Yeah.
There's a guy who should be in the Wargaming Hall of Fame just for those two things alone.
Yeah, for sure. Well deserved also.
Yeah. But a guy who's disappeared from the scene entirely, as far as I know. I don't know that he designs anything anymore. I don't know anybody who's in contact with him. I haven't heard anything about him for like 2 decades.
One last little gripe about our hobby is that I think we've allowed a lot of our founding fathers to sort of fall off the stage and disappear in ways that are not entirely worthy of the hobby altogether. And I don't think we'll do that again, because media and the rest of it, the way the modern hobby works, we're more interconnected than we once were. But nevertheless, I think we're losing a bunch of these guys. The designer of Advanced Third Reich just died here in Washington a couple months ago, and kind of a legend, but people didn't even know he was in Washington.
Right. Yeah. I think of guys like Roger McGowan that I'm always waving the flag for his design work, and I think this, what happened with what happened could happen to a guy like John Butterfield if he wasn't still designing. Like a giant in the hobby, but if he wasn't still active, I think you're right. We don't have an institutional memory, for lack of a better word or phrase, for some of these people. I mean, Don Greenwood, people have forgotten Don Greenwood because he's kind of not designing
now that he's not running the hobby and not designing, or running the convention and not designing.
Right. But he was so huge for in the 80s. He was the main guy in my radar.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I wonder, I wonder if there is a way to capture some of that history and, the loss of my grandparents. I lamented just how much they knew about my family lineage and its history when they left that we never captured. And, we need some sort of, some sort of X project to see if we can capture some of that stuff. Prototypes. When John Hall passed, I helped his sister resolve some of his estate, and she said, "Is there anything you want?" And I said, "Well, how about just a pair of dice, that John Hall used, right? And how cool that would be." And she sent a bunch, but I'm not gonna, I don't want to be the curator of the museum, but
indeed. But whenever the hobby has a problem, you fix it, Harold. So I'm really looking at you.
Yeah, I think we've now got 2 sets of awards. I think the time is long overdue for a 3rd set, honoring our forefathers.
Agreed. And the CSRs mercifully seem to be back on course, and some of the history of the hobby is captured there. But are there archives for any of this? Do we really have an appropriate Hall of Fame for folks who did a bunch? My thinking is no, not really, and it does suggest a problem that could use a little more attention.
All right, let us know how we can help, Jason.
For sure. Well, it was great to see you both, and have a good rest of the conversation, and I'll look forward to watching the rest when it's up.
Great seeing you, Jason. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for dropping by, Jason. Well, thank you, Harold, for arranging that. That was a complete surprise to me that Jason popped in. So great. Thanks for that.
Yeah, good fun. Well, it may not be the end. We may see.
We'll see what happens. We were talking about your 1777 game and how you had to kind of, how that game came about, I guess, is where we were at.
Well, first of all, look at Brant again, right? Talk about a disruptor. Yeah. Brant, if I fix the problems, I'm going to have to put in some cycles on you because you're not helping us at all. Create a few problems. You've already created a few problems.
I'm sure this is just more scam so that he can win a copy of your game.
It ain't going to happen. And as a matter of fact, not only is he paying retail, he's paying retail plus Canadian shipping to get it to him. So.
Oh, that's huge. That's hefty. Yeah.
That's a big fee. Well, campaigns of 1777, that came out of a couple of questions that I helped to resolve. So one of the questions I got when I started Liberty or Death was, Volko said, Mark Herman and I were talking about doing a coin game on the American Revolution, and we can't do it because how can you do Saratoga with coin system? And so that was one question, right? So my response to Volko was that the Saratoga was not one event. Saratoga was a mismatch in communication across the British generals, right, and Home Office. It was supply problems, exacerbated by a continuance down toward Albany. It was a massive disagreement between the natives and the British that by the time Saratoga came around, the natives had generally disengaged. So it was a whole series of things that took us to Saratoga. And frankly, the British loss at Saratoga was a fait accompli. Howe could not move up the river, and Clinton wanted to, but he wouldn't let him. And they couldn't move up the river toward Albany, up the Hudson River toward Albany in time. It was too late. It was, the opportunity had passed, but, they continued. And that continuation was really the end result was a fait accompli. There was no question what the outcome was going to be. The British had 4 days of supplies. So one of the questions I got from Mark Miklos and I were talking about Saratoga, and he said, yeah, Saratoga is a wonderful battlefield victory, and therefore, and I said, you know what? I don't know that it was a wonderful battlefield victory. It's some great stories. Benedict Arnold was there. You know the history, right? But the reality was that it was done. And sure, it may have taken a couple more days of battle. And if they had made an assault on the Patriot Fieldworks, then it was done. There was no chance. And so I wanted to prove that out. I wanted to show what was really going on and show that there are different alternatives to an outcome. And so that's why I created Campaigns of 1777, was to answer that. Well, how did it come about, and what else could have happened, and what if they had worked together? Those sorts of things. And that's where the game came from. Now, I had to figure out how to build a system. And one of my favorite systems is the Napoleonic Wars by Mark McLaughlin. And McLaughlin created a very clean operational system, right? I mean, it's really kind of strategic in that game, but in fact, it's an operational system of generals supporting each other into a battle. And worked very well. So that was really what I was trying to get at with the game. And Mark hasn't changed his mind, and I'm not sure Volko's changed his mind either. But that was the attempt.
Well, that's a good place. We have another. I got another surprise visitor.
What?
What indeed?
What?
I'd like to welcome fellow Canadian Brian Train to the conversation. Hi, Brian.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm great. I'm glad to finally speak with you. there's only the Rocky Mountains between us. I feel like we should know each other, but the continental divide is in the way.
It's a big place.
I don't know how big, but I visualize you guys living at the same street, just 2 doors down.
Well, Canada is like 4,000 miles wide and about 90 miles deep. It really is, which is probably why when you meet an American, they say, "Oh, do you know Joe Taylor from Ottawa?"
It's more like Brian lives in LA and I live in Denver. That's kind of.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Good to see you, Brian. How are you doing? What's going on? Looks like you're packing for a trip. I'm concerned.
No. This is. Oh, you mean the thing back there? That's my 30-year blanket. I've been working in the BC Public Service for 30 years. And as soon as you hit 25 years, they give you like a little pin and stuff and give you a dinner. But they also let you select an ugly gift. And so the first time when I hit 25 years, I selected an embossed iPad cover for the iPad I didn't have, and which I didn't have until like Christmas this year. My wife bought me an iPad finally. So I waited five years to get an iPad cover for the iPad. But anyway, 30 years, I hit 30 years in November, and you get a slightly different grade of better grade of presents to choose. And so I got a blanket. It was more useful than an ugly clock.
Or another iPad cover.
Or another iPad. Well, actually, they dropped that one off the list. So, you only got one chance to get the iPad cover. It's at 25 years. You can't turn the clock back.
And after 30 years, you're getting closer to needing that blanket.
That's true. That's what I thought. And you know what? It's warm today. It's quite warm where I am, and so I don't need it. But I tell you, most nights it's good to have a little lap robe. But for the rest of it, my house has still got a few renos going on. The upstairs is mostly finished after about 2.5 years, but we still don't have things like closet doors. So yeah. Anyway, that's why you can see all my shirts and things like that.
They look good.
But I'm very happy to have my study back, because for about 1.25 years, I was in a dark, airless corner of the basement, surrounded by about 3/4 of a ton of our junk and furniture.
It was a bunker. Brian admitted it was a bunker. It was a hard point in anticipation of war with America.
Well, it sure looked like it. And there was enough stuff crammed in that room. I mean, there was more stuff in that room than there was air. And I was like 20 feet from the nearest window. So really, it was airless. But if there'd been a blast wave, I would have been well insulated.
When I was at the GMT West convention in the fall where I first met Harold, I played Brief Border Wars twice with a couple other fellas there. And so maybe that game was developed down in that dank basement, for all I know.
Actually, Volume 2 was developed in that basement.
I've got it on pre-order. I can't wait.
Yeah, well, as a matter of fact, on Monday, Grant Kleinheinz is going to do a piece. He's published a piece by me asking his usual questions. So about Brief Border Wars Volume 2. At the end of December, I finally signed off on all of the files, the graphics, whatever, with Compass Games. And no sooner had we done that than John Krantz turns around and says, "Oh, yeah, Bill would like Volume 3 ASAP." So no good deed goes unpunished, I guess.
We're running out of borders.
I really enjoyed the first volume.
Yeah, it was interesting. I think, as I've said before in interviews about Brief Border Wars, I really, really love the old SPI quads. And I just wanted to bring back, the quad in a game. And Compass Games seems to have been picking up on that because they have a quad of East Front battles by someone, I can't remember his name right now, but sort of a rather simple system of just operational East Front battles. And I guess Brief Border Wars must have sold well enough that they welcomed Volume 2, and they figure Volume 3 will go too, but I'm going to have to start working on that.
GMT's got a quad from Mark Herman coming as well. It's using that system of the game that came out in C3I magazine. First it was Gettysburg and then Waterloo. And I think he's got four 4 more Civil War battles that are coming out as a quad using that same system. So maybe we're going to be neck deep in quads again.
Yeah, I didn't know that. One thing that I'm really looking forward to, though, is the quad that's coming out from GMT called The British Way. And that's 4 coin system games by Stephen Reganzas. And he's taken the coin system and he's stripped it down to its absolute essentials. And 4 campaigns, British counterinsurgency campaigns that are not often done. I think there may be 1 or 2 Malaya games out there. And I did a Cyprus game years ago. But I don't think anyone's ever done a game on Kenya, and nothing on the British counterinsurgency in Palestine. So he's really breaking some new ground there.
I've talked to a few people who have play tested that or played pre-production. There's a good bit of buzz coming about that game. There's some people out there that really seem to like it.
Yeah, I've spoken to Steve a couple times. He's very intelligent. He's quite well read. I think he's finishing off a doctorate in this sort of thing now. So he's got it way over me, in terms of volumes read and educationally.
So he's just knocking out a quad while he finishes his doctorate.
Yeah.
That's free time.
It takes me like half an hour to get up the energy just to go shovel the snow. Come on.
Yeah. Well, I've been fairly productive the last year or two on reflection, and it's good to see.
Was that did COVID help with that? The enforced staying in?
No, not really. It kind of interfered with everything because 4 months into lockdown, we decided to start these renos, and it just threw the whole house into a turmoil because I got rooted out of this study here. I had to go down into the basement where I had to work at my day job and work at everything else, on one small table, next to each other in this dark, airless basement. So it was. It wasn't the most pleasant place to work in. If we hadn't done that, it would have been great. It's sort of like, hey, pack the spaceship, let's go. But I think all in all, it just it was a bit. I mean, my work has always been kind of a creative outlet. Obviously, helps you to work out problems as well in other areas, and it was good. But you just have to have the inspiration strike you. So I was working on Brief Border Wars. I've been working on another development of the coin system called O Canada, which is a non-violent game on the history of Canadian politics. So there's 4 scenarios from the 50s up to the near future. And it's the coin system with some adaptations to it, but it's completely non-violent. It's you fight the war, conflict as it is, on 2 different levels, sort of like the levels of party politics. And then there's the higher level, meta level of issues and sort of psychological dominance of issues and, just your general legitimacy. And it's for 4 players. In a way, it's a reboot of the old SPI Canadian Civil War game, which was for 4 players that they put out back in 1976, 77. So it's a reboot of that old SPI game, which I always found really interesting, but it's done via the GMT system.
The René Lévesque years, the 70s, that was the high point for separatism in some ways.
Yeah, and that's why James Dunnigan put it together and put it out. I think he was doing a whole series of power politics games at the time, and I think he thought that this was a good situation. He didn't really understand Canadian politics at the time, but he did come up with a system that was an interesting way to model in the abstract, processes of power politics. And it was good that way. But now with this system, the GMT coin system, you've got 4 factions. They're all 2 of them are quite asymmetrical in means, methods, and motives. And the 2 sort of centrist factions are a bit closer to each other, but that just means they're more directly in competition with each other. Meanwhile, the extremists on either side can use them as stalking horses. So. It's I'd like to think it's interesting. It's the sort of thing that's completely unsaleable. But it's just put it out there.
It's completely I understand exactly what you're talking about. So there is a certain audience for it.
Yep. Well, SPI had trouble finding people for Canadian Civil War as well. They sold a few copies in Canada, and even probably not that many in the States. God knows how many they printed of that particular game. But that was it. And I think the only stir it ever made really was that some zealous customs agent blocked, somebody's order of SPI games that included Canadian Civil War. He thought it was subversive propaganda or something.
Yeah, you don't want that. You don't want that rule book to get out to the public.
Well, yeah, and not only that, it had a bilingual rule book as well. They went to the trouble. Dunnigan went to the trouble of having somebody translate the thing into French.
He wanted to make it saleable in Quebec.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I don't think we'll ever know, how many copies sold just where. But anyway,
Brian, you do all this work on counterinsurgency games, modern era, smaller smaller conflicts and things like that. But I'm a big fan of your Schelt game from Hollandspiel. Do you ever have any thoughts to do any more to going back and doing more with that system or more World War II things?
Yeah, I do. And then I wake up screaming. No, I would. I really would like to do more with that, because Joe Miranda's Bulge 20 staff card system that is, that I use in the Schelt campaign. It's an adaptation of what he used in Bulge 20. Is a really good system. I used it for the Schelt campaign, and I also used it for a modern irregular situation, Third Lebanon War, where the IDF goes into Lebanon sometime in the near future. But it's the staff card system, and I think it shows, it could be adapted, quite well to show, either a conventional military campaign or, some very asymmetric irregular war campaign as well. If I had time and the inspiration, I would like to do probably a trilogy of games using that system, of which Schelt campaign would be one. So I'd be looking to do two others on the adventures of the 1st Canadian Army. So there'd be like a Falaise, or a campaign ending in Falaise. And I looked into, the fighting for the Channel ports and stuff like that, and that's not very interesting. And the battle for Holland, that came after the Schelt, Operation Veritable, that kind of thing. Yep. That might be interesting too. The problem, of course, with all of these is balance. A lot of people said, who played the Schelt campaign said, yeah, it's a really interesting system. However, it's just so unbalanced. The German rarely, if ever, gets to do any kind of an attack. It's, and the Allied player, sure, he's got one eye on the clock and the other on his dwindling number of infantry that he can send in. But maybe that doesn't make it exciting enough for some people. So, Falaise Gap, Operation Totalize, leading up to the Falaise Gap battle would be interesting. And if that wasn't good enough, then maybe not worry so much about 1st Canadian Army in Northwest Europe so much, but one for the Canadian Corps in Italy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, because,
Ortona's totally
about the time of Ortona.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sure. I keep waiting for the great Ortona game. Somebody's got to do it.
There is an Ortona game out there that's been done by somebody. It's a newer one. It's a lot more detailed than the only other Ortona game that I know of, which was done by Steven Newberg a long time ago, a SimCan game.
SimCan game, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Steven Newberg, he did he published a number of these Canadian games, Canadian battles. But he also did a share of Desert War titles and that kind of thing. Yeah. I have been doing a lot of work the last couple of years on modern urban warfare, especially urban irregular warfare. And much of my time last year was taken up with getting ready for designing and then teaching a game at the Urban Operations Planners course, which the California Army National Guard put together in July. And I went down and attended the course. And on the last day of the course, we played this game that I had designed and spent a lot of time working previously in that year on sort of large-scale combat operations, in a generic modern city. And I found that very inspiring. And as after that game, I designed like 3 or 4 small games on different aspects of urban warfare that I found quite interesting. Just small, fast things that I haven't had time to do much proper play testing on it yet. But they're very simple games that just have a couple simple points to make. So maybe that's not so important. So it was really interesting attending this course because the students on the course were brigade and division staff officers who needed to be familiar with the differences in the modern urban environment, the different qualities and requirements of combat, and the civilian dimension, infrastructure, in the modern city, all this kind of stuff. So the next serial of the course is in May of this year, and I'll be going down and doing that again. And it was a very, very interesting time. It was the first time, actually, I'd had a chance to teach a game to a large room of people, practically all of whom were not gamers at all. So the game is fairly simple, as these things go. But to some people, they're all highly intelligent, educated, motivated people. I'm just amazed, at the quality. But for some people, it just seems to lie so far outside their wheelhouse, of experience. Sometimes you can see people kind of struggle with that. If I move this piece on the map, what does that really mean? Kind of thing.
So like an imaginative disconnect, not being able to play as an adult or something.
Yeah, because I think the thing is, a lot of people have board games, of one kind or another in their personal history. I mean, everybody's played, like Monopoly and Scrabble and stuff like that. But the idea of something on a game board representing something in real life, like even if you're familiar with Risk, then that helps you with that conceptual leap.
I guess for some of us, it's just been in our DNA for so long now, we take it for granted.
Well, right. Yeah, I've been gaming for 45 years now, I think, and it's it is second nature to us, and it's got a sort of quality of vocabulary and a sort of tacit library of techniques and approaches that seem obvious to us, but to an outsider, they either look really obscure or they just look really nuts. And that's what's interesting about games that I designed, like Brief Border Wars, which was a simple system, but something quite a bit different from your standard war game, or the District Commander series, which is another series of 4 games I've done on operational level counterinsurgency.
With Holland,
and of course, and of course the GMT coin system. All of these things, they lie outside the sort of conceptual boundaries of a lot of gamers, and I find that there's with many people, there's things that they have to unlearn, before they can, before they can really start to enjoy this system. And you see it with the GMT coin system, for example. Like, a lot of people treat it as like an area movement type of game until they realize what the lines of communication are for and how they can be used. Then the light goes on and becomes a different style of game. And another tendency, of course, is the GMT coin system is constantly evolving. So I talk to people who are asking questions, and their confusion is based on other games they've played in the series, and they've just mentally ported over these kinds of things. We do a lot of that in the hobby. I'm surprised that we're not, in a sense, still playing Napoleon at Waterloo, the old SPI favorite, over and over again. It's just, how did we move past that?
But we really notice that when a new game comes out that breaks new ground, and you can't just kind of skim through the rule book and kind of get it.
Yeah.
You find yourself talking to your other player friends and going, oh no, I had to really sit down and read that thing, because it took me a while to, like Atlantic Chase, to thank God Jerry White's rule book was so wonderful, because those were completely new concepts, that whole trajectory thing. And you just really had to wrap your head around something new.
And that's why I took that approach that I did with the Brief Border Wars quad and with the District Commander quad, because both of them, even though District Commander wasn't published with 4 games in a box, we did them one by one over the years, still it's got the same set of standard rules. So there's a set of standard rules that you have to learn. And then the 4 games or modules or what have you, they're all variations, like additions, subtractions, or exceptions to those core rules to mirror, the particular situation. And, as long as you try not to make them into completely different games, I think that's good. But again, people have to grok the standard rules, and they have to, again, do a little bit of unlearning and maybe a little bit of buying into things if you're trying to do something quite different. But that's the approach that SPI took with their quad games, is because at least at first, the original SPI quad games, they were all variations on Napoleon at Waterloo and Kursk. The blue and gray quads, we're kind of Napoleonic, and then the Napoleonic quads, and then Modern Battles 1 and 2. We're kind of variations on that.
So, Brian, 30-year blanket, you must be getting close to retirement?
Well, I'm 58 now. I've got a few years to go. I think I'm going to hang in there. I like the public service. I like the job. It agrees with me. I'm working in an area, as post-secondary education. I work in the post-secondary education system of the province, and almost everybody thinks education is a good. And I'm happy to contribute to it. And the people I work with are good. It's like all you could ask for in a workplace. And it's you get all the usual things, feeling a contribution and all that. So I'm not ready to go just yet.
Well, I'm not trying to run you off. My interest is the same thing I had in Volko and Mark Herman's retirements. Their productivity exploded post retirement. So would love to see the Brian Train peace dividend.
Well, that's a really interesting question. And to tell you the truth, I don't know how it would land. In times when I've been able to take or had to take extended time off, I'm not really sure it led to me being more productive at all. I really don't like to think about the creative process or where it comes from or what prompts it, or when and how inspiration strikes me. It does or it doesn't. I'm wondering if maybe, a lot of it is just kind of displacement activity, just kind of, you're not exactly frustrated, but you're moving in one direction, but you need, for a form of creative relief, you need to do something in a different direction. Yeah. And so, if I lost the structure of a day job, in my life and had nothing to do except turn out games, I don't know if I'd be more productive than before. It's hard to say.
Yeah, for the most part, I take my summers off.
Yep.
And so I got to tell you, I'm not as productive at the end of the summer as I expected to be at the beginning.
Yeah. So I'm it's interesting. Of course, by the time I retire, I'll be 65 and I'll have, I think I've already got 60 published titles. So, that's, I don't know. I don't seem to be slowing down much.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll just keep going.
I love it. All good stuff for us. Brian, thanks for reacting to my clarion call for support, and good to see you, and stay warm with the 30-year blanket there.
Thank you. It's nice to speak with you. Nice to see you too, Grant. And we'll see you around.
Yeah, we'll speak again.
I don't know if I'll be able to make it to conventions later this year. It kind of depends on what viral mutant strain we're on by then. But maybe I'll see you at Consum World. Yes. Or maybe, one day, Harold, I will make it down to SDHisCon in person. I really intend to. I love San Diego. I want to go back.
We'd love to have you, but at a minimum, let's grab some dinner at Consum World.
For sure. All right. Thanks, guys.
I can't wait for Brief Border Wars 2.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be coming out late in the year. I don't know when exactly, but everything's done. So all I got to do is just print the thing. But when and how that's going to work out, I can't say at this point.
Totally.
But I think you'll be pleased.
Good.
Thanks again.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, that was terrific. A fellow
Isn't that
Canadian. It was good. I love Brian's stuff. Great games from that guy.
Yeah, the B Train. And I have to tell you, one of my favorite people to talk to, just one-on-one. He is the funniest guy, and he was very formal there, but we only scratched the surface. He is so funny and dry sense of humor, and we've just had some great times together at Consim World. I love that guy, absolutely.
Yeah, I feel like it gives me a little Canadian chauvinism. I feel proud of him. I have no right to feel proud of him, but I do.
Yeah, that's one of the heads that goes on the your celebratory mount there.
That's right.
Your top 5 game designers, yes.
60 published titles. That's nothing to sneeze at.
Who are the top 5 Canadian game designers of all time?
Good God, I can only name probably 3. There's Brian. There's Mark Rodrigue. Oh no, there's 4. There's Mark Rodrigue from Bayonets and Tomahawks.
Mm-hmm.
Carl Paradis of the No Retreat series.
Yes.
Marco Poutre, Prelude to Rebellion.
Mm-hmm.
That's what comes off the top of my head. There's probably some. I know a few Canadian ASL designers, but they're scenario or HASL package designers.
I got to tell you who I'm going to give you credit for, since you can't come up with 5. And she would be very upset that I'm calling her Canadian and not French, but Morgan Guillon-Roté.
Oh, great. Yeah, wonderful. I think of her as French.
Yes.
Well, fantastic. Well, we'll take it.
Yeah, she spent a good deal of time in the United States when she was in North America, but she also spent a good time in Canada.
Well, there we go. Now we have our 5. I'm sure I'm probably missing somebody really huge, but I'm on the spot, so that's my answer.
Yeah, I'll give you a better answer tomorrow.
We should talk some about your latest game while we still got some time on the clock as well, because that's we touched on it a little bit when we talked about how it seems to me when you designed that game, it wasn't that it was you were specifically trying to design a game that was quick to learn, quick to play, that sort of thing, as opposed to going, I have this subject that I want to make a game on. It was more like, I have this chassis I want to fit a game into. Would you say that's right?
No, I agree with that. I haven't designed many games, right? This Flashpoint South China Sea is my 3rd war game, historical game, and I've designed another party game that a company called Broken Games has the rights to now. I'm interested in all sorts of different things. So one thing that I was interested in was this modern conflict between China and the United States. The other thing that I was interested in is, hey, can I really put together a simple game? Gene Billingsley, the president of GMT Games, he and I were talking once, and I said, I'm working on this big complex project, and I'm having a terrible time. And I said, I can't find anything that works. I'm not happy with anything. And he said, make a simple game, and it will cleanse your palate. And so the simple game that I made was Flashpoint South China Sea. And when I defined simple, I defined easy to teach, quick to play. So quick to teach, quick to play, and then you didn't have to memorize the deck, right? We've discussed these things. So those were the parameters that I put on it. And then I wanted to make a game about the conflict, the political, the non-kinetic conflict between the Chinese and the United States. And that's where the game came from. So, I was very happy with the outcome. It's, I shouldn't be the one to have to tell you this, but it's a very elegant, quick to play, mechanically very smooth, a lot of interesting choices game. Now,
yeah, I agree. Yeah,
I appreciate that. So, but is it does it teach? Is it a complex game for everyone? Does it Does it teach everyone stories and give everyone takeaways for the game? No, it doesn't. The conflict, right? So does someone who teaches at the world politics at the Naval War College, do they play that game and come away with a lesson? No. And once again, never my goal or intention.
No, it's not. It's same with somebody who plays Next War Vietnam or Next War China or whatever the next war on South China Sea would be. It's like that they have a different level of involvement with the topic, right?
Yeah. So, I kind of view myself as the designer of Watergate. And the only difference between us is that he selected a wonderful theme for that game, and I selected one that wasn't as interesting to the broad universe, but it was interesting to me, so it was fun to do. And the feedback has been pretty good, but it's a controversial game inherently. A lot of the controversies you and I have discussed over time is that people have a view of what they expect in a game, and that view may or may not be influenced by me. But frankly, I haven't talked much about it. I told everybody I made a game. If you look at any of the videos or interviews beforehand, I'll say quick to play, quick to learn, don't have to memorize the deck. And that's, that's where I am. I'm there. That's what it is. And
I find sometimes the criticism of games veers into the critic is criticizing the game for not being what he wanted the game to be, and rather than addressing what the game is.
Yeah.
Mark's got his Fort Sumter game. That I'm not as interested in that game only because I like a big meatier game on that subject, and so the quick playing game for me isn't as interesting.
Sure.
But I don't know much about the South China Sea situation, so a short game, I found it just great to go like, oh, I hadn't even thought of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's that's a curiosity, and I don't want to complain too much about reviewers because reviewers should do their thing. I don't think we see enough critical review in this hobby. Reviewers generally, what do? Number one, they like to open the box and take a video of that, which is fine, but doesn't help me much. But most of the time, you see a review, and very rarely do you see critical words about that game. I that's my feeling, right? And I've benefited from that for most of my short career in wargames. So I don't want to complain about critical reviews, but at the same time, I think that it's important that the reviewer understand where the designer was going, right? I'm not designing based on what you want, and I'm trying to anticipate that because I can't. I don't want to. I want to design it based on what I want. And if you don't like it, that's fair, right? Be critical because you don't like it, but don't like it because it's not this. That's not such a good.
I think one of the best places after you've interacted with the game, studied the game, if you're going to sit down and review it, I think one of the first things to do is to look at the director's or the designer's notes, where they'll often give you the clue as to what it was that they were trying to do with this particular project, and then interact with that idea rather than I wish it was this or I wish it was that.
Yeah, well, look, Jeff's got a good comment here. The designer meet the challenges he set for himself. That type of analysis takes more than a YouTube influencer.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I mean, but then the other thing that comes along is when you are a YouTube influencer or what have you, you tend to want to work on. You want to put your energy into. It takes a long time to make a damn YouTube video. There's a lot of editing and stuff. These live things are easy because there's nothing you can do. It's out of our hands. But to make the things, so you want to actually work on games that you enjoy. Like to put together a 1 hour piece on a game that pissed you off, it would be like spending 8 hours working on that thing that you didn't enjoy. So I can see that angle of it.
Yeah, agreed. But I'm happy with the critical reviews. I think it's okay. And Brant's dead on. And Brant, one of the things that drives me crazy is the proliferation of people just opening a box and taking a picture of the stuff. Right? I mean, that's the easiest stuff to do. I mean, and if I'm a game company and I'm passing out games for people to do reviews on, and all I get is an unboxing, I'm going to be kind of pissed, or at least I would be.
Absolutely.
But I do think that designers need to be more critical of the product, and we just don't see much of that. I'm not going to name them, but there are 3 or 4 of my favorite reviewers that every review is positive. Every review is positive. And,
I'll respond to a couple of those things. One, the unboxing thing. I do unboxings on my YouTube channel, but I'm doing unboxings of games that I paid for. I get sent the occasional game, but it's just a way to keep the content going in the channel in between the beefier things that you put your heart into, right? It's not. I'm not a great watcher of unboxing videos. It's just it's kind of like filler content. But in terms of the more critical reviews, I loved reviews by a fellow named David Hughes. He did reviews in Battles magazine. So he's a print, he's a print reviewer. He's not a YouTuber or a podcaster, but he did reviews of Holland 44 and Blazing Chariots, I think, the BCS game, and both of those were quite critical. At the same time, he said, I really enjoyed the game, but this is where the simulation breaks down for me. Didn't ruin the game for me, but I don't think frontages were like this, or like he puts a lot of thought and research into that. As research that I just don't have the time to do.
Yeah, and Brant again, as always, brings up an interesting point about the popularity of the unboxings, and frankly, if they're popular, who am I to judge as to whether or not they should exist? It would be interesting to know how many times a good game gets an unboxing.
That's true. There's a million of them.
Yeah, there's a lot, and so I've also there've been a lot of unboxings of Flashpoint. It's a GMT game; it got a lot of attention, and selling a lot of units. But the unboxings were many times people that were doing reviews or how to plays, right? Which are very valuable, I think. Content-wise, and harder to do, right? More time and all of that stuff. Yeah. So I probably should shut up on my unboxing soapbox.
Well, no, I hear you, because I get how it doesn't add anything to you. It doesn't pique your interest, and as a designer, it doesn't help you at all. But as somebody who puts out those pieces, when I get a new game, I zip off an unboxing, and I might not put it out for another 3 months or whatever. It's just it'll be there in the queue for when I need some content. But it's the first thing I do when I open the box, and then I got to take the time to actually learn the game and have something to say about it down the line.
Yeah. And Robert's point here about that you highlighted is about people don't want to be negative sometimes, and I hear that. But I would like to see more critical discussion, and critical discussion's what gets me into trouble, right? When I air my opinions about this or that, and suddenly the Hex fans, of which I'm one, feel like I'm moving their cheese, and I'm really not. I think there's a ton of great Hex encounter games. I'm not going to be able to limit that if I wanted to, which I don't really want to. So I don't know. Part of the fun.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, the tempest in the teapot in terms of the discussion about Harold doesn't like hexes. It's not that. It's wanting something other than hexes without getting rid of hexes. Is like to say we have something new means we don't get something old, that's just not how the world works.
Yeah.
It's not a zero-sum game. It's way more additive. I mean, we think about sometimes the 80s as a golden age, 70s and 80s as a golden age of war games, but I mean, we're pumping out more in 2 months than would come out in a year in 1975.
Yeah, and I'm as always, I talk too much about GMT, but I'm close to them, and I know the designers and the management and the company, and like them, right? Like their process, most importantly as a designer. But it's amazing the criticism that Gene Billingsley gets for the assertion is that GMT has limited capacity, which is true, right? Any organization has limited capacity, and that by doing games that are not traditional hex encounter, that they're limiting the number of hex encounter games. But I think if you look at the sheer quantity of games that GMT has done over the years, it's grown dramatically. Their capacity has grown dramatically. And boy, there's still a lot of really good hex encounter games that come out of that shop. Just a tremendous number.
The criticism that drives me crazy for those guys is the criticism of the P500 system. Mm-hmm. And there seems to be people who think that because some title that they really want is got a super high P500 number, and it's been there for months and months, that game should come out before something else, and that's just not how it works. And I would be amazed if Gene didn't have different contracts with different designers. So just because designer X hit his P500 number really quickly, it still might not be profitable to publish right away. Maybe it needs to hit 1,000, whatever. There's more things that go into it, I'm sure, than just the damn P500 number.
Yeah, I'm not saying this from any knowledge I have, but there's no doubt that if Mark Herman or Volko or even Jason come up with a game and it's ready to be published, it will be published before Harold Buchanan's game.
Right.
There's just no question, and that's just basic economics. And GMT has every right to make those choices. The thing we got to remember is that I talked to Mark Herman a lot about the fall of SPI because I think it's so interesting. And he and I have some significant disagreements over it. Of course, he knows and I don't know. So that's the best part of that disagreement. But the reality is that, that P500 system has been a lifesaver for GMT and other companies using very similar systems now.
Yeah.
To just make sure that you have a group of people that are committed, or a soft commit, which is what P500 really is.
Yeah, and that's what Medium's doing now. They've kind of got a P250 system going, and it's a soft commit as well. It works great for them.
And for them to be able to use that works to all of our benefit. Now, it's frustrating for designers because what it means is that if you come to GMT and you have a finished game and you hand it to them, and it goes on P500, you still have to wait. And unless you're Mark or Volko or John Butterfield or Jason Matthews, it takes some time. It's a system that we all need healthy companies. The other thing that I'll say that's controversial, and I know you're shocked that I would say something controversial, the prices we pay are far too low for these games. Far too low.
I hear you, but I can't get on the double the price bandwagon.
Well, first of all, this will appeal to your Canadian sensibilities. There's a bunch of people that just work for free. Yeah. And I'm not talking about designers, they're developers and play testers and even art, right? Underpaid.
Play testing is just the most awful work. Like, it takes a certain kind of person to do it.
It's a volunteer army. It's all volunteer, right? So the people have a right to get paid. But we need healthy game companies, and if we don't allow them to be healthy, they won't be around for any of this. And so I get very frustrated when I hear about complaints about pricing, because these are products of intellectual property. They're not products of components, right? That's not how you price them. And I'm telling GMT all the time, price isn't high enough. They don't listen. The good news is they don't listen to me.
Well, when I spend $70-$80 on a GMT game, that's like what it costs to go out to, take the family out to a movie, and I'm going to get way more enjoyment out of that game than one night at the movies. Or one night out at the pub or whatever. It's not a big deal. I think the other thing people miss though is that the P500 system isn't just it's not some kind of meritocracy or democracy where it's Gene has to acquiesce to the votes of the people. He's still got to go with what he thinks he can sell, this regardless of where the votes fall. I mean, when you look at how some of those Commands and Colors Napoleonics games can have 1,000 pre-orders and still not be in the print queue, like Gene's got to have a reason for that. Maybe he's not making as much of a margin as he needs because of all the block components. I don't know what it is, but there's got to be a reason that he doesn't print those as often as he could.
Well, their model isn't 1,000-unit print runs, right? They wouldn't do a game if they thought they could sell just 1,000 units. So the second, third, fourth printing of these games gets kind of dicey and dangerous for them. Especially if the second printing, third printing has nothing else to add. And that's the other thing the other point I make to them is that if you're going to do another printing, improve it, do something good, add some more solo, better solo, more scenarios, better art, whatever, right? But improve it and you won't have that risk.
But then make an update kit as well.
I'm trying to keep up with Brant is just bombing us here with thoughtful analysis. Shouldn't his face be here? Can we get Brant on here? I mean, come on, Brant. If you're gonna,
he could pop in. He must have the invite.
He's got to have the link, right? If he's gonna be thoughtful and give us all this insightful commentary, he should put his face behind it. Yeah, I took my extended family out for lunch right before. Hamburgers, French fries, soft drinks, nice place on the beach. Over $100. I would have much rather gotten them all bologna sandwiches, and then went ahead and bought a game. But
yeah, it's funny how we get we get all bent out of shape over the price sometimes when you think of how much enjoyment you can get out of it. But then I also think about, we touched upon this earlier about there's a lot of folks who play a game once and move on. And so they're not getting the same sort of cost per hour benefit out of it that those of us who like to play a game multiple times do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Brant, check your email. If Grant isn't going to give you the link, I just did.
No, that's good.
I just took control of things, Grant. I'm sorry.
That's good.
Plus, we're only going to have 2 minutes of his time to talk anyway. So
he's at work, so he might not have a webcam anyway.
I'd like to see where he works. I'd like a tour of his office, and I'd like to talk to some of his coworkers.
Oh yeah, really get to know what everybody thinks of him.
That's right.
Thinks how he's been kind of taking his foot off the gas while he's putting all his energy into the ACDC instead of his actual work.
That's right. You all think he's working here at the office? Are you crazy?
Yeah, no, they know. They're just like, oh man, we need Brant back because he's just really letting the whole team down.
Hey, we only have a few minutes, so while Brant is trying to figure out how to use the link, if he is, I wanted to talk a little bit about SD-HistCon. We have a SD-HistCon event coming up on March 18, which is a Saturday. And Grant, hope you will be there and hang out with us. 1 day event, very similar to what ACDC does here. And of course, we work closely with Brant and trade ideas and help out however we can. That's one thing, but we also, we're going to turn San Diego Historical Games Convention into a not-for-profit. Which enables us. It's going to enable us to grow and do a bunch of things that we've been trying to do. So that's all good. We also have. There we go. There we go.
Yeah, ignore the Middlesbrough stuff. I'm at my boss's desk. So I'm a Newcastle guy, not a Borough guy.
It says People's Republic of something. What is that? Oh, there we go. That's pretty good. How's it going, Brant?
I help manage the desk at a local indoor soccer facility on the weekends. So I am legitimately at work. So I closed the office door for a minute so that I could hop on.
Say hi. Yeah, I'm. You have a minute and 30 seconds, but how's the con going for you?
It's going really well. We've got a couple of events that didn't have any players show up or sign up even, which was a little disappointing because there's some cool games, but I think they're just sort of outside people's comfort zone. And then we had two events where we had some GM issues, just GM illnesses, injuries, whatever, that we lost the GMs. For all the ones where we're getting GMs and players in the same place, they're having a great time. So it's just connecting GMs and players in a couple of cases. Well, Brian Howman got sick, couldn't help it. The guy that was supposed to GM the Twilight 2000 game spent last night in the ER, couldn't help it, Yeah.
But, and that's a big part of it. The ACDC convention is actual play. It's actual getting either teaching play or play.
Yeah. I mean, we like doing the talk shows and things like this because it gives people a chance to like get a whole bunch of these things all in together on one weekend where you get a chance to see a bunch of really neat topics. But ultimately it's all about the games and we've got a lot of great GMs. Jim Ozarski does this stuff 3 times a week all year long. And so folks gaming with him know what they're getting into. Great, Pete. I'm glad you had fun with it. But guys like, Devin and Keith from Lock and Load that, teaching their stuff online, they always put on a great game. Patrick from Patrick's Tactics and Tutorials, this is the first time we've had him as a GM, but he's had lots of folks guest on his YouTube channel where he's taught stuff online. Gary teaching great campaigns. He did an OCS boot camp for one of these one year. It's great. We like to find GMs that are good teachers of the games, and that's one of the key things we're looking for. So we have a great time with those guys.
Well, for guys like me who are, sort of stuck in the middle of nowhere in terms of live conventions, ACDC and HistCon, San Diego HistCon online, they're like a lifeline.
Yeah. I'm glad we're able to help fill that niche for folks that can't get to a virtual one or to a real one, or see this as a good, I don't want to say filler, but a good, spot in the calendar for them to be able to join one of these. I'm glad when we're able to get those guys to have some fun. I do, Harold, you were talking earlier about sort of the difficulty of some of the critical reviews and that you would like to see a little more critical analysis of those things. 2 thoughts on that. First of all, I think there's a lot more of it out there than people realize. The problem is that instant push button publishing has so fragmented the wargaming media world that you really got to go looking for it. There's lots of folks that have a lot of really good, interesting things to say, but it might be buried in a game-specific forum on BGG, or it might be, God forbid, you try to find something on the Consim world, on CSW, on the main CSW forum site, or it might be on some dude's blog that's got like 4 subscribers. There's a lot of people with really interesting things to say that don't always have a big megaphone to say it with. And it can be hard to find. And that's a big challenge.
The tricky thing, I think, is, we were talking about David Hughes earlier, and you mentioned liking his stuff in the comments as well, Brant.
Yeah.
Whenever he publishes something that criticizes a game a bit, or has some quibbles, he just gets hammered online about it. From all the big fans of the game, just let him have it as if he'd, put a knife in a baby's eye or something. It's like, he just said he didn't really think the frontages were real. It's not that critical a thing.
Yeah, there's a couple of sacred cows that I've consistently taken shots at in my time as a war game commentator, and folks have heard most of those arguments plenty of times by now. But anybody that wants to quibble with things that I'm criticizing, had better show up with receipts, because I've got reasons why I'm criticizing those things, much like David Hughes. Like if David Hughes is saying, we did the research, the frontage on this is X, the game portrays it as Y, that's a problem. Like he's got the documentation to back that up, and people can gripe about it. Well, the game's fun anyway. Fine, go. He's not saying don't play the game.
Exactly.
And so when I start similarly criticizing modern ground combat is kind of my shtick. That's the world that I know the best. In the vast majority of the Cold War goes hot games that exist at battalion level and above, the Cav units are never properly portrayed. There are very few of them that do. That's because the Cav units don't operate as a monolithic battalion somewhere. They are far more spread out. It's the frontage thing, and that's why that's top of mind, because you mentioned that with David Hughes. If you pull out, the Würzburg game from Mod Quad 1, the U.S. Army Div Cav unit is this overpowered single counter floating around the battlefield. Well, yeah, because you add up all the firepower in one squadron, and it's way bigger than any of those other battalions on the map. The thing is, it doesn't operate as a monolith. Like, it's spread out all over the map. And so you can legitimately say, hey, that's not how this unit is supposed to be used. Yeah. Somebody's going to pitch a fit about it, but doctrinally, they are wrong. Like, I can pull out the FM and say, that's not what this unit does. So
that's like Brian Train's great criticism of I think of the Central America game about how the insurgent forces are treated as if they were organized brigades and battalions.
Yeah. No, it's a kinetic model of a conflict that was not kinetic. Yeah. My favorite criticism of Liberty or Death was, and it was hard for me at the time, but I love it now. But it was I cut it out and pasted on Word, and it was 5,000 words. And the title was "What I Don't Like About Liberty or Death." And you get a little more comfort and a little more grace behind accepting the fact that there are people that don't like your game, and there's nothing you can do about it.
First of all, I think it is a gorgeous game. It is one of the best looking games that I've ever put on a table in front of people.
It is.
To me, the biggest criticism for Liberty or Death, and maybe I'm scratching a sore itch here a little bit, but the biggest thing is the campaign game, the full length one that starts, early as you can go and runs till the end. The two biggest problems are, one, the French player can show up at halftime and he hasn't missed anything. Yeah. It's the nature of the conflict. Like, the French didn't show up till the middle of the war.
Right.
But the other thing is, a smart Indian player can't lose, because the British have no incentive to go attack the Indians and keep them down. They're their allies. Why would you? The Continentals can't afford to attack the Indians, because then they're going to run out of, firepower to hold off the Brits until the French show up, and the French aren't even there to do anything about it. A smart Indian player keeps his head down, stays out of the way, builds villages everywhere he can, and then suddenly it's too late to do anything about it, and he's going to win.
This is the classic situation where when somebody boldly says, side X can't lose, this has to be played out.
Yeah. I think 7 or 8 of them. I've played 7 or 8 full-length campaign games of Liberty or Death, and I've never seen the Indians lose.
So I tell a story about this. This is an example I often use when people talk about balance, because balance is meaningless unless you talk about the context of the people that are playing it.
Yeah.
Because balance for the three of us in a game would be different than a balance for me and Mark Herman and somebody else, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was at my SD HISCon pre-COVID at one point, and a guy walks up to me and he said, "Love your game, Liberty or Death, but I got one problem with it. And the problem is that I can't ever win as the British. Nobody can win as the British. You can't win as the British." And so I walked him over to a table with one of my other good buddies, Michael Vilbert. And I said, "Mike, I'd like you to meet this guy. Michael says that if he plays the British, he can't lose." and right, it's that. And we get in these echo chambers and perhaps you're right? Perhaps that's factual, right? But we don't know, because the way to test it would be to let you play everybody.
Yeah.
Right. So I, there's strong opinions on the side of a game, especially a coin game, is great.
Yeah. I think it's a great game. One of my favorite Liberty or Death stories was actually the Origins, the year it came out. So 2014, 2015, somewhere right around there. We had 2 games on the schedule. We had one event on the schedule that was set for 2 tables. So we were going to take up to 8 total players. and have one GM get both tables started and then kind of bounce between them to answer questions. But we had so many extra people show up hoping to get a seat at the game that we ended up getting out my personal copy also. And we were running 3 simultaneous tables of Liberty or Death. And we ran, poor Rick Billings got run to death as the GM on that one, trying to bounce between 3 tables. But we had enough people show up that we had to add an additional table to the game in that session. That was
well, you guys were kind enough, I think, even to invite me up to that to play, which I will at some point, right? I'm undergrad from Ohio State. I grew up in Cincinnati. It makes perfect sense. I should go back to Columbus at some point, right?
One of these days.
I'm up there every fall. You're just going to have to move the convention.
Yeah. I'll get right with 2 Origins on that. If Buckeye Game Fest used to be in the fall, they've moved it to the spring now, so it's going to happen in April going forward. But we're also going to be at Buckeye Game Fest pretty regularly, also supporting Gary in the War Room there. So,
yeah. Awesome.
So that's going to be pretty regular. Guys, I got to actually go back to pretending to work here. So
good seeing you, Brant.
Thanks for dropping in, Brant.
Yeah,
I appreciate it. So I got coworkers wandering in and out of that closed door I just showed you a minute ago. Riley's right here in the office with me at the moment. So
good seeing you.
Thank you guys both for being here, and I'm glad you were able to be a part of the ACDC. And for the audience watching, I hope you're having a great time, and I appreciate everybody being here this weekend. So thanks a bunch, and y'all take care.
Peace.
Harold, before we wrap up, I just wanted to give you a chance to talk a little bit more about H2, because we can go overtime. There's, that's fine. I just wanted to give you a chance to talk about the convention a bit, because I went to in the COVID year, I went to your online one, and it was just like, oh, this is where's online conventions been all my life.
Right. No, it's interesting. There's a latent demand for these online conventions that we never even thought about. And there are plenty of people that are either in a place where they can't get to these other conventions, or perhaps mentally they're in a place where they just don't want to be around a bunch of people, for COVID or not, right? So we've seen a lot of people. The other, these, I don't know, I could go on at length about these online conventions, because they're great with the ability to pop in and pop out and see, and we like ACDC, we put together a pretty good group of people to pop in and out on. But we got this March convention coming up on the 18th, so would love to see people there. Is
that a themed convention?
It's Saturday, and there's not going to be a theme. I'm going to have at least 2 tracks. I'm going to have a track for designers. That I think will be fun, and anybody can go into either track, either of events, anytime. But I think that will be a fun track, and we've got some really interesting panels set up around that. So that'll be good. We've got our November face-to-face convention in San Diego, but Grant, we're going to do something else that we really haven't talked much about, which is I've always wanted to do a pop-up historical convention at a historical site.
Right.
So, one of the places might be Gettysburg or Ticonderoga, right? You and I think I've even talked about this. That's going to come to fruition this next year. In August, somewhere on the East Coast, yet to be named, but we're working down that path. We'll have a pop-up, and the Friday will be just tours of history stuff.
Yeah.
History stuff. What does that mean?
Yeah.
So historical sites, events, things. And then Saturday and Sunday will be a couple of days of gaming somewhere for all of us. And I'm so excited about this. And we'll do it in a location, and my hope is that we'll do it someplace else the next year, just kind of moving around.
They pop it up to whatever, whichever battlefield or historical site makes sense.
We've got Conflicts of Interest magazine is our online e-zine. We've got 1 issue of that out. We're going to be working on another one, probably first or second quarter.
And that magazine has a critical review in it.
It does, and it's a what is it? Absolute War, right? And Carl Paradis from Canada responded to that review. So we. In the old school method, we gave Carl an opportunity to respond, and we have a critical review coming up for the next, and not a game that we loved as a group, but there are some things we have issues with, and so it's another critical review coming. All of that said, we owe a game to somebody, and maybe it's somebody that's registered. Is that how you want? Do you want to?
Yeah.
Would you like to pick somebody that's registered and give it to them, or should we only choose from the people that spoke? We're going to excluding Brant, of course. What do you think?
I think the people who spoke is probably a good way to go. It's a good way to do it. Because I don't know if I have a listing of everybody who is or was.
So we do. If you look at the event on tabletop events, it gives us a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 that registered to show up. So if you wanted to do that, you could roll a die and we could just pick one of them.
Yeah, I would do that.
Okay. So there's 9. We need a D10.
I'm just going to go an online dice roller.
And they're listed in alphabetical order, so we'll just go to top to bottom of that list. I think everybody has access to that.
Well, then we're going to do. I can do a D9 actually.
Oh, very interesting.
On this non-conventional dice roller on calculator.net. All right, so if they're listed alphabetically, I will just give us a number. Here it goes.
All right.
It's taking a minute. Number 8.
That's Tommy McGuire.
Well, there we go.
There it is. Congratulations, Tommy. So can I ask you, Grant, if you can find his name and address?
Yeah, I'll try and get a hold of Tommy, and or if Tommy's still watching. I don't know if he is or isn't, but if he is, he can get a hold of me at the pushingcardboard.com website. But I'm sure I can get a hold of his details from Brant.
Good.
And yeah, that's great. Tommy will get a copy of Flashpoint South China Sea.
Yes, published by GMT Games, available at retailers near you.
Yeah. Well, thanks. So, you know what, Harold, we only got through maybe a third of the stuff I wanted to talk to you about today, which totally makes sense given the way we both like to yak. So yes. We'll do this again. We'll do it again on either on my podcast or, God damn it, your podcast.
Yes.
We need more of your podcast, and we need more Wild Weasel to come back, then the world would be a harmonious podcasting place again.
You're very kind, Brant or Grant. Great to see you. Sorry to call you Brant here at the end. What a treat to play a game with you when we were at GMT Games.
Well, and it was a hex and counter game. For all the people who think Harold is anti-hex and counter, there we were. I mean, it had some chip pull, so it wasn't from the Dark Ages, but
I wasn't wearing a shirt that said had a hex with an X through it or anything.
No, it was a great hex and counter.
No, it was a great experience. I enjoyed playing with you. Great to get to know you, and we ate together a few times, and that was a real treat. The highlight of that convention for me. So thank you for inviting me to talk, and good to see everybody. I'm glad that we had some people in the audience.
Well, hey, thanks, Pete. I think we both say thanks. Well, I think of out of all the conventions, the one that I have the most chance of getting my wife to make a trip to is yours. Going to Ohio is not the same thing as going to San Diego. Ohioans take that with the disrespect because it's just a fact.
Yeah.
If I say, do you want to go to Cincinnati or do you want to go to San Diego? That's pretty clear.
It's the ocean. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks again. Thanks to everybody who dropped by to see our first go at a live interview, and thanks so much to Harold for being my guest and co-host, and especially thanks for bringing Jason and Brian for a couple of surprise shots. That was two great guys that I've admired from a distance for a long time. So that's great.
Yeah, good fun.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of ACDC.
See you later, everybody.
See you later. Well, I hope you enjoyed listening to that as much as I enjoyed talking with Harold and Friends. As I said off the top, there will be a regular episode with a dive into a game in the next 6 to 10 days. So keep your ears open for that. And in the meantime, thanks for listening. Check us out on the web at pushingcardboard.com and pass us along to your friends. Thanks again.